Hi guys! I'm so excited to have you join me on my channel today. Are you ready to get your sewing game on? Because today, we're going to create a beautiful new dress pattern called Annia. I can't wait to show you all the tips and tricks to make this dress come to life. The Annia dress is the perfect choice for any occasion. Whether you're sipping martinis at a cocktail party or dancing the night away at a wedding reception. All pieces have been minimized to explain better how to sew. Hope you like it this way. Don't worry, your pattern pieces will be in full size. Let's get down to business. We will start with the bust. It's time to tackle those front bodice bust and waist darts. Don't worry, it's easier than it sounds. Copy the markings from the pattern on the wrong side of the main fabric. Then, fold the fabric along the dart lines, aligning the dart legs. Make sure to align the dart legs precisely, as this will ensure that your dart ends up in the right spot and gives you the best possible fit. Use pins to hold the fabric in place if you're worried about it slipping. Now it's time to sew. Start at the wide end of the dart and stitch along the marked line until you reach the point. Remember to backstitch at the beginning and end of the dart to secure your stitching. Once you've finished sewing, make sure to give those darts a good press. Use an iron set to the appropriate heat setting for your fabric and press the dart towards the bottom or sides. Repeat with the lining pieces. Once the darts have been completed, we can move on to the next step, sewing the front and back pieces together. To begin with, make sure your fabric pieces are facing the right way. You want the right sides facing each other. This will ensure that your seams end up on the inside of your garment. Pin in place the shoulders and sides of the lining piece. Repeat with the main fabric bodice pieces. Now let's get sewing. Sew in place using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Take your time to ensure that your seams are straight and even. Once you've finished sewing, it's time to press those seams open. Apply fusible interlining on the wrong side of the facing pieces. Follow the specific instructions for your type of interlining. Some may require a certain heat setting or a damp cloth. Use your iron to press the interlining onto the facing fabric, being careful not to move it out of place. Once the interlining is securely attached, it's time to sew the front and back facing pieces together on the shoulder line using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Take care to ensure that your seams are straight and even. Press the seam flat using your iron. The next step is to attach the bottom of the facing to the lining. First, make sure you have the right sides of the facing and lining together. Then, match up the notches so that everything lines up perfectly. This is important to ensure that your facing and lining are attached at the correct points. Use a 1 centimeter seam allowance and stitch the bottom of the facing to the top of the lining. Take your scissors and carefully clip along the curved line of the seam allowance, making sure not to cut into the seam itself. It's a good idea to sew a flattening stitch at 0.1 centimeters on the side of the lining. This will include the seam allowance in the seam and help everything lay flat. Take the main fabric bodice and the facing and place the right sides together, matching the notches on the neckline. This is important to ensure that your facing and bodice are attached at the correct points. The next step is to sew the facing to the bodice using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Take your scissors and carefully clip along the curved line of the seam allowance, making sure not to cut into the seam itself. After you've finished sewing, it's a good idea to sew a flattening stitch at 0.5 centimeters on the side of the facing. This will include the seam allowance in the seam and help everything lay flat. Finally, turn the facing right side up and press it flat with your iron. Align the armhole of the main fabric with the armhole of the lining, making sure that the wrong sides are facing each other. Double-check that the notches and side seams match up before proceeding. Once everything is lined up, sew the 2 layers together using a 0.5 centimeters seam allowance. Let's get those sleeves ready to attach to your dress. Take your sleeve and overlock the bottom hem. Then locate the notches on the sleeve cap. Next, sew 2 rows of gathering stitches between the notches. Remember to leave long tails of thread at the beginning and end of the seam for gathering. Use a 0.5 centimeters seam allowance for the first row. Use a 1.5 centimeters seam allowance for the second row. Turn the hem of the sleeve up 2 centimeters to the wrong side of the fabric. Once you're happy with the fold, press it flat with your iron. Next, fold the sleeve lengthwise, right sides together, and pin the side edges. Sew in place using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you've finished sewing, it's time to press the seam open. Finally, overlock the seam to prevent fraying. Sew the hem in place at 1.8 centimeters. It's a bit hard for me to sew it because I downsized the patterns, but don't worry, for you it's going to be super easy. It's time to attach that sleeve to the bodice. To start, align the armhole of the bodice with the sleeve, right sides together. Take your time to make sure that the notches and underarm seams match up perfectly. Next, gently pull on the gathering threads at the top of the sleeve to make it fit the armhole of the bodice. Distribute the gathers evenly. This might take a bit of patience, but don't worry, it's worth it to get that perfect fit. Once you're happy with the fit, sew the sleeve to the armhole using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Using a seam ripper or sharp scissors, carefully cut through the threads of the second gather stitch. Press and overlock the seam. Our bodice is now complete. Now it's time to work on the skirt. Take the main fabric skirt pieces and overlock the sides and bottoms. Take the back skirt pieces and place them right sides together. Now pin the center back edge, starting from the zipper notch to the bottom edge. Sew in place using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Press the seam open. Now let's move on to the front skirt pieces. Take the two pieces and place them right sides together. Mark the opening of the vent with chalk. Sew in place using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning and end of the seam to secure it. Press the seam open with your iron, taking care to ensure that it lays flat. Fold the slit seam allowance inwards as marked on the pattern, 2 centimeters. Asterisk. If your fabric is runny, apply a strip of fusible interlining on the wrong side of the slit seam allowance. Pin the slit in place and press it with the iron. Next, sew a top stitch on the overlocked edge of the slits. Start at the right hem and go up the slit, then go down to the left hem. Make sure to keep an even distance between the stitches and to catch the folded edge in the seam. Finally, give the vent one last press. Take the back part of your skirt and lay it on top of the front part, right sides together. Make sure the notches on the sides are aligned and pin in place. Sew in place using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Press the seams open. Now it's time to finish off the main skirt. Grab your measuring tape ruler and mark the hem of the skirt 4 centimeters from the edge, 2 cm hem. Then, fold the hem up to the wrong side of the skirt, following the marked line. Sew along the folded edge of the hem at a distance of 1.8 centimeters from the edge. Once you're done sewing, Give the hem a good press with your iron. It's time to bring the bodice and the skirt together. Take the main fabric bodice and place it on top of the main fabric skirt, right sides together. Leave the lining out of it. You'll notice that there are notches that need to be matched up to ensure a perfect fit. Pin everything in place and sew the two pieces together at the waist using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Press the seam open. Oh, it looks like it's time to switch up the thread color. Overlock the center back edges of the back underskirt pieces. Take the back underskirt pieces and place them right sides together, making sure to align the center back seam. Sew the seam together, starting at the zipper notch and finishing at the hem. Press the seam open. Take the back underskirt piece and lay it on top of the front underskirt piece, right sides together. Make sure the notches on the sides are aligned before stitching the pieces together using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Press the side seam open and overlock. Overlock the hem of the underskirt, then turn the bottom 1 centimeter inwards to the wrong side. Sew in place using a top stitch at 0.9 centimeters from the folded edge. Give the hem one more press. Time to attach the underskirt to the lining. Place the right side of the lining with the wrong side of the underskirt. You'll notice that there are notches that need to be matched up to ensure a perfect fit. Sew the two pieces together at the waist using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Press the seam towards the bodice, then turn everything right side out. It's time for the zipper. Pin it carefully in place on the center back of the dress, main fabric, starting at 1 centimeter below the neckline and making sure to align the raw edges of the zipper with the raw edges of the fabric. Double-check that the zipper is fully open and that the teeth of the zipper are facing the bodice. If your fabric is on the delicate side, consider applying a fusible interlining tape on the center back edge of the dress before attaching the zipper. Next, attach a concealed zipper foot to your sewing machine. This foot will help you sew the zipper in place as close to the teeth as possible. Follow the guide on the foot, sewing slowly and removing the pins as you go. Once the zipper is attached, close it up and press the seam to make it nice and flat. Match the other side of the zipper with the other side of the center back edge of the dress. Match the waistline and neckline and pin in place. All right, it's time to bring the dress and facing plus lining together. With the right sides facing each other, align the edges of the facing plus lining and the dress. Don't forget to include the zipper in the middle. Pin the layers together along the side seam to hold them in place while sewing. Once you're happy with the placement, carefully sew the layers together. Match the waist seams. Clip the seam allowance at the zipper ending of the underskirt, taking care not to pass the seam. Repeat on the other side. Sew in place using a half zipper foot, following the edge of the zipper's teeth. Repeat on the other side. After sewing, it's a good idea to trim the corners neatly to avoid any bulkiness. Then fold the seam inside out so that the seam allowance is facing towards the inside of the dress. Using an iron, press the seam to smooth out any wrinkles or creases. Press the final dress one more time. Our dress is now complete. Good job. Let's work on the waistband and the bow now, shall we? For this part, I made the patterns full size, so don't be confused. First, we need to apply some fusible interlining on the belt piece. If your fabric needs extra support, you can apply 2 layers of interlining. Next, fold the belt in half, with the right sides facing each other so that the fusible interlining is showing. Pin it in place to make sure it stays in position while you sew. Sew along the raw edges using a 1 centimeter seam allowance, but make sure to leave one short side open so that you can turn the belt through. Once you're done sewing, trim the corners to remove any excess bulk. Trim narrow the seam allowance also. Turn the belt right side out. Once the belt has been turned to the right side, press the seam carefully so that it is on the very edge. Fold the seam allowance of the open edge and sew it closed with a flat fell or blind hem stitch. Take the bow one piece and fold the fabric in half lengthwise, making sure the right sides are together. Pin along the long edge, leaving both ends open. Sew in place using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you're done, turn the fabric right side out and press it flat. To give the bow a bit of stability, you can add a thin layer of felt inside. I used 2 layers. I find this method better than ironing fusible interlining because it makes the bow more puffier. After that, close the sides with an overlock stitch to make sure everything stays neat and tidy. Fold the fabric in half to form a loop, with the seam in the center of the back. Pin the loop together in the center, overlapping the overlocked edges. Sew in place the overlapped edges. Repeat the steps with the bow two-piece. Take the center bow piece and fold it in half lengthwise, right sides together. Sew along the long edge, leaving both ends open. Sew in place using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Turn the center bow piece right side out and press the seam flat. Overlock the edges closed. Place bow 1 on top of bow 2. Squeeze them together in the middle and wrap the center bow piece around them. Turn the bow around and overlap the edges of the center bow piece, encasing the pieces. Pin in place the edges overlapped. Arrange the ears of the bow nicely. Take a needle and a thread and hand sew the 2 overlapping edges. Congratulations, you are almost there. Slide the belt through the back of the bow ring, making sure it is centered. Once it is in place, add the metal snaps on each side of the waistband to secure the belt in place. And voila! Your beautiful dress with a contrast belt and bow is complete. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon.